Most database reactivation campaigns fail not because of the message, but it's because of the list. And most people don't realize it until they burn through it. And so before you send anything, let me go over how to properly take care of your list before you send anything in HighLevel. Hey, my name is Paul Kim, and in this channel, I talk about getting clients with HighLevel and most importantly, getting clarity before you implement AI and automation. So in today's video, I want to talk about what most people would do when they would do a database reactivation. They would get the list, they would import that into HighLevel, and then they would write the message and they would just send out the message via SMS or email. The problem with that is that it is going to be messy. It is going to be unorganized. And most likely, what's going to happen is you're going to run into spam, low replies, and you're going to burn through the contacts. So if your list is not prepared, you're not sending a database reactivation. You're basically sending out noise. And so I'm going to go into how you prepare the list properly. If you watch till the very end, I'm going to go over how you can reduce your chance of your account being not triggered for when a lot of people opt out of your SMS database reactivation. So before we go over the steps, as I talk about clarity, right, before we implement AI or automations, and that's the core focus of this channel, I really want you to understand that reactivation is not about just sending message. It's about sending the right message to the right person. So you have to understand the list, because what you're trying to do is you're trying to get conversations and not just a one-way communication. So I want us to change our mindset from I have a list to I understand the list. So let's go over my 3 simple step framework when it comes to preparing the list. And so before I go over those 3 steps, I want to emphasize that this is the assumption that your email and sending setup with regard to your email and SMS is configured properly. If that isn't, this is going to, of course, not work. And so let's assume it is. Those configuration, I'll do that in a separate video in the future. But for now, let's talk about the list. All right. The first step out of the 3 is cleaning the list. And so that means that you are going to remove the duplicates. HighLevel, when you import the list, it will remove duplicates, of course, but I like to do that in the spreadsheet, or whether you're using Excel or whether you're using Google Sheet, you just want to remove the duplicates. Second is you want to remove invalid emails, right? While HighLevel has the ability to tell you whether the email is valid or invalid, I tend to notice that it is not 100% correct. And also, you don't want the HighLevel system to be the first one triggering the invalid, because then it's going to affect the deliverability. And so what I like to use is a service outside of HighLevel to go through it and to notify me whether it's a valid or invalid email. I use a service called clearout.io. I'll put the link in the description below. There are a host of other services out there. So just use a reputable service. I like using Clearout, as I told you. Okay. Now, with regard to phone numbers, whether they're cell phone numbers or landlines, HighLevel will, of course, if it goes and it doesn't go through, then it'll trigger and it'll put do not disturb. Now, the only consideration is when people opt out of those SMS. And I'm going to talk about that at the end of the video on how you can minimize that so that your account doesn't get triggered and get affected. So some of the other things I like to do with the list, whether you're using Google Sheet or whether you're using Excel, there is a formatting tip that I like to use. I like to use lower caps on all the emails. And so I use a formatting tip equals lower and then the field that's associated with that email. And then the other thing I like to do is when it comes to people's names, usually the first letter is capitalized where the rest of it is not. So, for example, if I'm sending an email out and you just want to make sure that the name is properly spelled out, capitalized, the formatting for that in Excel spreadsheet or Google Sheet is equal proper and then in parentheses the field of for that specific field for that email. So I like to use those. And then lastly, I like to import first name and last name, and sometimes the list that comes from the client has their full name. So basically their first and last name within the same field. So what I like to do is, whether you're using Excel or spreadsheet, there is specific formulas where you can separate the first name and last name, and then you can separate them, and so that when you import it into HighLevel, you can use first name and last name. And so I like to do that so that way when I send out an email, I could put a custom value and say, hi, Paul, rather than hi, Paul Kim, right? So that just sounds very more personable rather than, the full name. The second step is segment your list, right? Depending on the segment, your messaging is made different. And this is where you're going to get replies, or the way that you send messages is going to increase the likelihood of response from these contacts. And so whether it's past clients, your network, or it could be inquiries, sit down and separate and segment your list to make sure, but that you don't overcomplicate it and just make it as simple as possible. All right, so the third step is add context. And so what I mean by that is you're going to tag these contacts based on the segment and even further tag them if necessary. But you don't want to go too in depth. Otherwise, you're going to make it difficult for you. I try to make it as simple as possible. So you tag them according to your segment. And so you can either put the tags in the spreadsheet, or you can, when you separate the segments and when you import them, you can tag them as you import them into HighLevel. All right. Depending on how many contacts, that is something that you will have to do, right? So if you have, let's just say, 10,000 contacts, what I would do is I would segment them first and separate them, and then import them based on segments, and then tag them as you go along in the import process. All right, so now that you've cleaned the list, you've segmented and you tagged, what that does in essence, let's say, for example, if you have a list of 1,000 contacts, so previously you would have just sent out a message to 1,000 contacts, and that message would be very generic. Now that you've segmented and tagged them, let's say that 200 were past clients, 300 were leads, and then 500 are cold contacts, right? So the messaging would be to your past clients, basically rebuilding the relationship. The old leads, or the leads, basically would be a check-in. And then to the cold contacts, you would send out a reintroduction of yourself to those contacts. So now your campaign doesn't feel like it's outreach. It's basically having conversations with them via email or whether via text message. So this is where a tool like HighLevel, which lets you tag, segment the list, enable and also have the conversation in one place, is what makes this platform powerful. But the tool isn't the strategy. The prep work is what's important. All right, so just as I promised, one of the things that I do when whenever I work on a client that has a huge database of old leads, especially when it comes to SMS, is that before we execute and start the SMS campaign, we would turn off the SMS compliance reply out to unsubscribe. And then we would replace that with reply out to unsubscribe. And so what that does is because when people type in stop, and that is a carrier level opt out. But so basically, if you have a high level of opt out on a carrier level, what it's going to do is going to trigger it. And so if you start having a lot of people opt out because they're cold contacts, then the carrier is going to suspend your account. And so what we like to do is on a software level, implement that specific reply out, but making sure that we institute the SMS reply out, so that if the client in the future, once he's cleaned up the list, then we can trigger that back on. Okay, so and that trick has helped us numerous times in, so that our client's account doesn't get affected when we do these mass SMS campaigns. Well, I hope this video helped you think about your list differently. And if it has, go check out my roadmap, which I go over step by step on how to get clarity. And in my next video, I'm going to be talking about how you can actually write your reactivation messages that actually gets replies. All right, so I hope you watch that video coming up.